This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace. You know when you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself? Talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, Greg. And my goodness, man, we are 2 weeks away, roughly speaking, I think around 2 weeks away from the start of the college basketball season. And my goodness, it feels like it's been a long time coming, but at the same time, it's also kind of crazy that we're already back here again. And I'm excited to be talking about actual games relatively here shortly.
Thank goodness gracious. We need all the game talk that we can possibly get because there's been a lot of speculation here in the offseason, and there's been speculation as to who might not be eligible for the start of the season. And Tyon Grant-Foster did have his waiver denied a few days ago by the NCAA. Now, it seems like Gonzaga is going to try to fight for him. We shall see what is going to be happening on that front. But as it stands right now, Tyon Grant-Foster not going to be taking the floor for Gonzaga. How do you take a look at that ordeal and just Gonzaga as a whole? Because I do think that despite the fact that Tyon Grant-Foster does not get the waiver, that this Gonzaga team is going to be fine. They're going to win the WCC, and I actually still really like this roster even without Foster.
Yeah, and obviously he would have been kind of one of those pieces that might even kind of make them get over that proverbial hump already right out the gate. Now, they have a lot of guys coming back. They have a lot of already talented pieces that weren't really in the fold last year that really could have a serious impact in this year's roster. And although Tyon Grant-Foster, we'll kind of see how that situation goes, they'll ultimately be fine. And at the same time as well, with these types of moves, with these players fighting for that extra eligibility, I'm not going to be the most broken up person about a player getting denied an extra year. I don't really like it when we have the 26 and 27 and 25-year-olds kind of dictating the sport. And last year when we kind of really saw that top end of the crop, it was a lot of those older players really driving things. And I also think that has to play a handicap with the players that have had their waivers approved, have kind of lived in the college game for quite some time, because we've already seen that pay dividends for a lot of these programs.
And I think that's so interesting that you do bring that up, and we'll talk about Gonzaga a little bit more in a second, but with all that you just said, does that mean that you're going to place a little bit more emphasis on these freshmen this year? Because a lot of these guys with their COVID fifth year, they're all gone, unless if you're Chad Baker-Mazzaro, who I think he might still have 17 years of eligibility remaining. Who knows? Maybe he did the NCAA as solid and he promoted the game of golf or something. I don't know, but he just seems to have eligibility coming on the wazoo right now. But that said, we've got a lot of these guys that were having that fifth year now out of the fold, and that means that more of these rosters, they have a higher percentage of freshmen than they've had over the last few years.
Yeah, and although the transfer portal allows these teams to sort of build out that inherent experience by going after those upperclassmen, at the same time, to your point, all of a sudden, it now feels like the freshman class, which has kind of been almost dormant the last couple years outside of some really, really notable names. It's been sort of like almost a non-factor in a lot of these teams that we see at the very end of things, unless you're Cooper Flagg, who was kind of the one standalone unicorn in last year's season. And yeah, to your point, I think we are going to see a lot of that become a more focal point where these aren't going to be just dudes who are putting out 15 or 20 minutes a game. They're going to be like the true kind of starting pieces that can help you win a championship. And so in the early goings, do I want to invest in those freshman heavy teams or those teams that are starting maybe 2 or even 3 freshmen? Probably not, but I'm watching them with a really keen eye. And I guess what? I'm not fading the unknown. I'm just seeing whether or not I actually should be betting on them come, say, December.
And it is going to be interesting to see what we get out of those freshmen this year, as this year looks like it's going to be a rock-solid class. And you mentioned Cooper Flagg. How about the Boozer brothers now at Duke this year? So they go from having Cooper Flagg, and I don't know if either of the Boozer brothers are going to be quite Cooper Flagg, but you know what? That's a good way to be able to pass the torch. As our good friend Rob Donaldson, who does great work with the show/podcast Rob's Best Bets, he's joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And getting back to Gonzaga, they're pretty much the opposite of that because they've got a lot of guys actually sat out a year. The man of steel, Steel Venters, is going to be seeing his first action in 2 years. We know that Jalen Worley was out last year. You've got a lot of guys that they skipped a year. Heck, they had a guy in Braden Smith, not the Braden Smith of Purdue, but the guy that used to be at Colgate. He took a voluntary red shirt, something that you don't see in this day and age of college basketball. And that has me actually feeling really good about Gonzaga. And I actually feel like this team might be coming into the year undervalued, where most years they come in very overvalued.
100%, because the names that are on the paper aren't the names that we typically associate with being, like top end players in the country. And Gonzaga seemingly always has that type of guy in the mix. And all of a sudden, a guy like a Steel Venters, who kind of flew way off the radar, who was a legitimately awesome player, all of a sudden, he could be like that sleeping giant of sorts, where he just all of a sudden comes out after a 2-year layoff and immediately starts dropping numbers. And if he can live up to that initial billing and what he was able to bring over from Eastern Washington, all of a sudden we're talking about a Gonzaga team that I think has an even extra layer of being very, very good. And yeah, that's even without Tyon Grant-Foster, who would be just an ultimate luxury piece at that point in time as well. So yeah, I look at Gonzaga. It's a very veteran-heavy lineup. It might even be better than what we're currently pegging it, because there's players that are kind of that unknown upside piece, and I am a really big buyer into what Gonzaga has going right now.
Yep, I am as well. I think that they are going to be in for a really nice year, as Rob Donaldson, who does a great job with the show/podcast Rob's Best Bets, he is joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And Rob, it is going to be very interesting to see what we get this upcoming college basketball season. And when it comes to taking a look at what we've been getting initially, we're getting a lot of these, and air quotes here, secret scrimmage results. I use air quotes because, well, they're not really a secret anymore, because they always find a way to get leaked out. We do have more of these charity exhibitions, which I'm a fan of, always being able to raise some money for charity. That's a good cause, so we are all for that. But what do you make out of some of these, and I air quotes here, secret scrimmage results? Because I always think that it's very interesting that you have people that they either take it as an end-all be-all, that their team is going to go to the national title, or they think that these mean absolutely nothing whatsoever. They're like, the points on whose line is it anyway? If you remember that show where everything's made up and the points don't matter. And we actually did see the result of LaSalle versus Rutgers. That was a made-up result, because that secret scrimmage that a lot of people were talking about never happened.
Right. And that's kind of the game we're playing with this, because even the results that we know happened, we don't have the context of what was going on. Like, okay, Iowa State lost by 15 points to Creighton. Was it kind of factored in there that Iowa State in the entire second half of that game was starting players that will never touch the floor probably in the regular season? Formation bias piece. Oh, I knew Creighton was going to be dominant this year, and this is a proof as to why that's the case. And also people maybe be saying, hey, I knew Iowa State was going to be bad, and this is proof that that's also the case. And like all these things, you really take it with a grain of salt. I really don't value these at all. We already kind of know what the players look like. It's just kind of nice to see freshmen on the floor if you can get, some context of how those types of players performed. Really, the akin sort of comparison that you can make to is Major League Baseball, spring training, when you see that AA pitcher going up against a major league lineup, or you see a major league pitcher struggling against those kind of high A or AAA baseball hitters, because yeah, they're probably testing out their curveball. They're probably testing out their changeup, pitches that they probably won't use in bulk during the regular season if they're a certain type of pitcher. Well, in college basketball and these secret scrimmages, you're going to have guys working across the floor on things to get better, not necessarily to perform and win the game or win the scrimmage. So yeah, they're completely meaningless to me, but I love seeing the reactions to those final scores and people kind of jumping the ship.
Oh, absolutely. That is always a lot of good, clean family fun, and there's always a lot of reaction to be had there. And I do think that you bring up something so interesting because I don't take a lot out of the final scores themselves. If we did, we would have had like USC making a deep run in the NCAA tournament or something like that last season because I think that they beat someone very notable in a secret scrimmage. I think it actually might have been Gonzaga, as a matter of fact, and we all know how that went. But how much do you want to take a look at the individual players? Because I do think that there can be something to be gathered from the individual players and how they fare rather than the final score itself.
100%. I think that's where the value lies in these secret scrimmages is all of a sudden, if you're seeing a freshman get run with the ones, that's usually not just like a flash in the pan weird thing that the head coach is trying out. That's like a tell on, hey, I know you think that this might be our lineup, but here's what it actually might look like. And if all of a sudden you're seeing a lineup or teams rolling out these kind of weird lineups that do feature those younger players or those new transfer portal additions and maybe implementing some guys who we don't necessarily think that we thought we would see with that number one unit, hey, maybe you don't want to be jumping the gun with them in, say, the first week or even first 2 weeks of the regular season, which can result in a very bad thing if you're betting against them or a very good thing, high upside thing if you're betting on that side of things as well. And so, yeah, I think that's where the value comes with these secret scrimmages, the player usage, but ultimately the final results, even the individual stat lines, for me, just completely irrelevant from that standpoint.
Yep, I am in agreement with you there. I do think that the actual final score is something that you can't take much from, but there are some players that are starting to stand out, as Rob Donaldson, who does great work with the show/podcast, Rob's the Best Bets. He's joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And have there been a few guys that have been standing out to you that maybe you thought that they weren't going to have much of a role, but it appears as though they might? Like, I will bring up an example for you. Nicolas Avadeus, I've been hearing a lot out of him from Virginia Tech. He's the international man of mystery that comes over from Greece, like a 6'7", 6'8" point guard. The more that I've been talking to people, the more that I've been diving in, the more I'm thinking that he's going to be able to have a nice year. Have there been a few of those guys for you thus far, or is it still a little bit of wait and see going into the season?
Well, I look at this Villanova team, and this is one of the teams that's kind of been leaking a little bit in terms of the secret scrimmage aspect, and I don't know how much to really buy into these sorts of things, but if Devin Askew is getting a fair bit of run, the way that they've been telling us that, yeah, he's going to be the definitive starter, he's going to get a lot of playing time. So one of those things where we've seen Devin Askew in a lot of different roles being a high volume, my ball type of guy at really bad programs for now some point in time. And I worry if that's going to be the sort of the tenor of Villanova out the gate, maybe that is a team that you just kind of wait and see on rather than back them with the new fresh head coach right out the gate, because again, that's the type of dynamic that's gotten Kansas State in trouble over the years, gotten Kansas in trouble over the years. Heck, even Memphis for certain squads have had that issue. And I do kind of wonder when you have that my ball guy getting the insertion and also just immediately getting the usage, that might actually serve as a detriment to some of these programs that are in a rebuild or in a retooling period. Maybe you just kind of hold off in the interim until everything kind of goes through there.
And ironically, on Tuesday with Kevin Willard, he came out and said that his team is completely banged up right now, which I think makes this an amazing stopping point for part number one of this conversation. And we'll continue it on the flip side with Rob talking about how much we want to fade some of these teams in which your coaches are coming out and not necessarily having the most savory of comments, like Kevin Willard was saying about his team being banged up. How much can we make out of that? We're also going to be talking with Rob about some of the teams that he's bullish/bearish on. We're going to be talking about quite a few ACC teams as well. So that's coming up on the flip side right here on Coast to Coast with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the Beeson Family Podcast. Here, lovely Las Vegas, for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family of Podcasts. Great to be rejoined by Rob Donaldson. He does such great work with the show/podcast, Rob's Best Bets. You're able to find him on youtube.com/Rob Donaldson, where he's breaking down some college football, some MLB. It's going to be college basketball season. He's going to be doing a great job on that front. Follow him on Twitter/X @RobDFB, and We left off talking about Villanova, and I was leading into this with the fact that Kevin Willard, a few days ago, he came out and he just admitted that his team is completely banged up right now. And how much is Villanova perhaps on a little bit of a fade list to begin the season? Because that could be why Devin Askew is getting so much run, because Kevin Willard came out on Tuesday. He's like, yeah, our guys are completely banged up. We're injured.
Yeah, and that 100% kind of gives me the idea that Villanova is one of those teams that you fade early in the season right out the gate because everybody's excited, kind of in just the national narrative is, hey, Kevin Willard coming off the Sweet 16 with Maryland. He jumped ship to go to Villanova to make it a better program. Who can be worse than Kyle Neptune? I think Kevin Willard is going to be one of those coaches that ends up actually being a successful hire at Villanova, but in the interim, when they're dealing with these issues, when they're implementing a new lineup, when they're implementing a new coaching staff, absolutely. I think the brand is there. I think the hype is there to fade them because I don't think the results will be lined up with those two kind of in that first month of the season.
Absolutely. I do think that that is going to be really interesting to look at, as well as Rob Donaldson, who does great work with the show/podcast, Rob's Best Bets. He's joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, and there are a lot of conferences that either have had their media day or will have their media day, and I'm not sure how you take a look at things, but do you make anything whatsoever out of the comments? Because the only time I really make anything out of it is I just brought up the Kevin Willard comments of we're banged up. I highly doubt that there's going to be a lot of coaches that sandbag their team. I don't think that there's a lot of coaches being like, hey, fans, you want me to lower the morale to just lift you up and make you feel like it's even better when we do win? Here you go. There's not a lot of people are going to actually put down their fan base to lift them up to begin the season. I actually think that it's a very bad thing if you're not talking up your team. And that's like the only thing that I can make out of it, because it feels like so many coaches, they just want to give out what the fans want to hear. And the only time I can really make anything out of it is when a coach doesn't give you that, like Kevin Willard just did.
Right. And sometimes when I pick up on coaches, and everybody has a different personality, and we don't want to play the game of like, hey, we're going to determine what this guy is actually like in his personal life and with his team by these little sound bites of 2-minute long, question or responses to questions. But when I do look at the ACC and the media day that they just had, and I see a guy like a Steve Forbes, who he's won a lot of games at Wake Forest. He's actually raised the bar at Wake Forest, but it's like now he can't surpass the bar that he's raised for the program himself. And now they're kind of, I don't even know what you call like coaching purgatory state of they can't get above a certain hump, yet they're always kind of at that hump. Steve Forbes, when he's talking about his team, when he's talking about the upcoming season, it doesn't really feel like he's selling us on a team that's going to get over that hump. It's almost like, yeah, we're going to continue to compete and we're going to continue to win the games, but it's always been like you've fallen short. I kind of want to see that extra oomph, that extra excitement, that extra sell job on saying, yeah, we're going to be a lot better than in years past when we had good squads. And so Wake Forest is kind of falling into that same boat yet again of everything just being kosher. They're fine with where they're at. They're complacent with where they sit in the ACC. All of a sudden, that middle of the pack, when you're looking at, say, Stanford or SMU or, Georgia Tech, these programs that are kind of overseeing some young, youthful movements with new head coaches and exciting players getting added into the program, maybe you take that to take that extra step because a team above them, that's one of the approaches that I kind of take to the media days. And what I look for is that excitement. And I didn't see that excitement from Steve Forbes in the Wake Forest answers.
And I'm so glad that you bring that up, because I always like to ask you who you're all bullish/bearish on. And I've been talking about this the last few days. I actually feel like the ACC, the middle of it, might be a little bit better. Hiring on Will Wade over at NC State, hiring on for Virginia Ryan Odom. I thought that those were good hires. Now, I still have some question marks with regards to Jai Lucas over at Texas, but I know that he's got some very, very good roots with, I believe, John Lucas II. There's quite a few John Lucases out there being of relation to him. And then obviously with Florida State, that's a little bit of a team of mystery as well. But I look at that middle of the ACC, a team like a Syracuse, I'm actually feeling a little bit bullish on. Virginia Tech has not been a team that I've necessarily been feeling too much, but it feels like there might be a little bit of upside with them, with the international men of mystery coming in for them as well. And I do think that with the ACC, this could be a little bit of a renaissance year for them, and shall we say a little bit of a redemption year after last few have been just absolutely terrible.
Yeah, and even a team that last year I thought took a lot of strides that didn't get the public recognition for it was a team like a Stanford under Kyle Smith. And in year one, they won 21 games, and Stanford was a bottom feeder team, whether you're talking about, the Pac-12 or the ACC, just kind of that projection of where they slotted it in. And whether it was at, San Francisco, the Ivy League school that Kyle Smith coached at, Columbia back in the day. Yeah, Columbia, those are two programs that obviously San Francisco's experienced a lot of success. Columbia really hasn't. He won at Columbia. He won at Wazoo. He had 25 wins his last season at Wazoo and made the round of 32 as well that season. And then in year one at Stanford, he walks in the building and they win 21 games. And it's not being talked about because 21 games in the ACC is like one of those, you're not making the NCAA tournament. You're not making a lot of these postseason tournaments, and nobody really cares at that point. But I think that's important to notice that in year one, because in year two under Kyle Smith, this is 100% a guy that's built up winners at weird spots. And I think if you're looking at, again, a wider open ACC with an improved sort of middle grouping and a team that, again, you look at Wake Forest, you look at Clemson, you look at North Carolina, these are kind of those major fixtures that have almost stagnated to an extent. And heck, you even look at Pitt, a Notre Dame, a Virginia. We don't know what to expect from those programs. They haven't really kind of lived up to the billing that they set themselves up for 2 years prior. And I think from that standpoint, Stanford is one of those teams that I'm buying in on, kind of a very oddball team that I'm buying in on, but I think it's a good thing that they have the travel on their side. I think it's a great thing that they have Kyle Smith, and I think I'm going to be a believer in this team from this on the spread department right out the gate as well.
Yep, you're a believer in Stanford, and I had them much higher in my projector finish than a lot of these preseason polls as well, so we're in lockstep there. And a man that I'm always a believer in is you, Rob, because you do such an incredible job breaking down this game of college basketball. I know you, much like myself, getting set for what is going to be a tremendous World Series as well, so love to get people at home know what's on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Well, hey, Greg, we are so darn close, man. We are knocking on the door of actual game action in college hoops once again. And for those who want to follow my bets in college basketball and also my bets in Major League Baseball leading up to everything, Twitter/X at RobDFB, and also my YouTube channel, which is just my name, Rob Donaldson. But as always, Greg, I appreciate having me on, man.
Rob is such a wealth of knowledge every single time he joins me, and he has joined me quite a bit in this offseason. He lends such amazing insights. Also, he does a great job on the baseball front, some college football, some NFL. He's got you all covered there over on youtube.com/Rob Donaldson. So big thanks to Rob for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. And if you do like sharing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, there's name does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is via an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. We are up to over 2,170 straight days without a missed podcast here on Coast to Coast Hoops. This actually goes all the way back to when this was college basketball betting overtime and hooping with hoops. We've went through 3 different name changes without having a missed podcast, so you can count on there being a fresh podcast tomorrow. And for those that are looking for the conference previews, I've done one for all 31 conferences. If you look in the shows, the show playlist that you've got wherever your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, list goes on and on. Scroll down there. Every single one of them, they are all there to get you guys set for what is going to be an incredible season. We're less than 2 weeks away from the tip-off, and when we do get that tip-off on that Monday, picks and analysis will be back your way every single game, every single day. So I appreciate you tuning in today, and I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.